All right, so here we go with part two. We left off last time talking about the process by which Britain began to assert itself and come to govern directly in a more direct manner over the Indian subcontinent and the peoples located therein. What we'll do now in the second segment is to turn attention towards China and the developments that are taking place there. Again, this is all occurring within the framework of the Qing dynasty that we talked about and kind of sketched out the dynamics and aspects of in earlier lectures. So the early dynasty itself, roughly from about 1644, when the dynasty was established, until about 1661, under the Shunzi reign, we see the consolidation of power taking place and the removal and replacement of Ming Dynasty kind of you know characteristics and aspects as the Qing begin to really kind of um, uh, grow in confidence as far as their capabilities of governance are concerned. From 1645 to about 1683, having consolidated power on land, on within the region of China itself, or large tracts of land there located therein, the Qing decided that it was time to begin to turn attention to asserting itself and consolidate on the high seas and consolidate control over the neighboring islands, what is today Taiwan. The Qing are going to send an armada against the pirates that used Taiwan as a safe haven for launching raiding attacks on not only the ships and the shipping lanes along the coastline of China, but also on the ports of China itself. And in many cases, these were uh, pretty extensive raids that took place. That not only just kind of hit and run type of endeavors, but more kind of prolonged and sustained campaigns in many respects. So it had a very costly effect and took a costly toll on China's wealth, revenue derived from trade itself. And so by mid 17th century, mid to late 17th century, really the Qing dynasty is interested in trying to extinguish any type of challenge to its sovereignty um, as far as these trading ports and the routes were concerned. From 1673 to about 1681, there would be a series of flare ups and rebellions that occurred. One of the best known of these is the rebellion of the three feudatories that you can see on. Um, in essence, you had three governors from southern satrapies or provinces within the sphere of influence of the Qing dynasty itself within mainland China, and they rose up against Qing authorities. But after 8 years of prolonged, kind of arduous campaigning and military exploits, the Qing rulers were able to crush this rebellion. So roughly here, for even much of the 17th century, for essentially maybe in essence 40 years or so, the Qing were fighting for their existence, but also and consolidating control. I mean, from 1644 up to the 1680s is this effort in which the Qing are beginning to kind of really assert themselves in the day-to-day affairs, you really might say, of the Chinese people themselves. And this was also a period of cultural growth that begins to take place. Um, by the year 1661, and from 1661 to 1722, you begin to see one of the longest reigning periods occurring within the Qing dynasty. That taking place with the Kangji reign. This is, again, one of the longest reigns in Chinese history. And as a result, because of this almost 60-year span, or maybe in excess of 60 years, there's a period of stability, a period of growth, continuity, um, you know, and also Kangxi himself, the emperor, was a patron of the arts and learning. He sponsored major scholarly enterprises during this period of time. He toured his empire extensively on 6 occasions um, to witness conditions firsthand, in and around his sphere of influence. What this does is it keeps the emperor in contact with and in touch with the realities on the ground, and so that it's he doesn't rely on uh, his advisors or any kind of delegates sent on his behalf. I mean that the emperor himself is seeing it with his own from a firsthand account type of perspective, and he can plan accordingly. He can make policy accordingly. And so, as a result of things like that, the Kangxi is really seen as a pretty capable and accomplished emperor, and it also shows again a degree of confidence. I mean that he feels safe traveling throughout the extensive portions of the empire itself. With regard to kind of international relations or foreign affairs, you might say, Kangxi was initially tolerant of Jesuit missionaries, Catholic priests that were coming to China. Um, but he really was interested in what the Jesuits were bringing with them as far as technology was concerned, not necessarily over their kind of doctrinal beliefs. And actually, in many cases, he quickly grew weary of Christian principles and the squabbles that began to emerge over issues of spirituality, salvation, proselytization, and the like. By the close of the 17th century in 1698, Kangxi is going to go ahead and, as kind of further example of his accomplishments in the area of foreign relations, he's going to negotiate and conclude the Treaty of Nerchinsk. This is the first recorded treaty between China and a European power, that being Russia. This was a security agreement, um, which pacified the shared border between Russia and China. Again, if you recall from the lecture on Russia, that there was this Russia was beginning to extend its influence, becoming kind of a transcontinental power. Setting up settlements on the Pacific coastline. And so, as a result of that, this made it almost a necessity for China to begin to take this Russian presence as, seriously, and begin to kind of open formal channels of communication with that state to the north. This was also the Treaty of Nerchinsk was also a commercial treaty. Russia was allowed to establish a trading agent in Beijing to represent and act on behalf of Russian trading interests with regard to, any types of agreements or contracts or trade routes or commodities being exchanged between the two countries. And also, Russia won concessions um, in being able to establish a Russian Orthodox Church in Beijing as well. Almost right on the heels of the Kangxi reign was another prolonged period of imperial authority established with the Qianlong dynasty, lasting from 1736 to 1796. Another 60 years or so of consolidated, centralized, very stable and continuous authority. Again, when you have that in place, This is going to provide for kind of a great deal of confidence when it comes to cultural pursuits, as we saw with the Kangxi reign, but also economic activity. And as we saw also with the Kangxi reign, that of being able to commit themselves to uh, diplomacy and enacting treaties. When the Qianlong dynasty is established, or reign is established, this is going to kind of continue that tradition or practice. It's during the Qianlong reign that we see large population growth taking place. Again, if people are confident and feel confident about their quality of life, about their day to day survival and stability and security, then they're more likely to have children. And this is, China is no exception during this period of time. The Qianlong reign also oversaw the actual geographic expansion of China as well. And with it, the uh, parallel growth of market economies and urbanization as well. Specifically with regard to conquest, we see in 1751 the Chinese beginning to subdue Tibet. Uh, Shortly thereafter, from 1765 to 1769, the Chinese are going to invade Burma. And by the close of the 18th century, in 1793, China would go ahead and invade Vietnam. So the relations between those countries, those people of Southeast Asia and China is a very long, storied one, and one that brings about a healthy amount of suspicion even today with regard to kind of relations between these peoples. That in the case of Vietnam, they were not necessarily enthusiastic about Chinese interference, given the history of not only this invasion but other attempts at absorbing Vietnam into kind of a wider China itself. There was also going to be, during the Qianlong period, regulation of international and commercial contact. So from 1757 to 1842, you see foreign shipping being constricted to the city of Guangzhou. Guangzhou. Now, Britain, for its part, was able to win concessions to trade with other cities, but that would be over a process of time. That would take a considerable amount and several rounds of negotiations in order to win those concessions. And by 1784, a very young United States, having just won its independence the previous year, would now begin to uh, make its presence known and win rights to trade with China in the port of Guangzhou itself as well. Kind of, again, establishing a point of reference and contact between the United States and China dating back to 1784. Um, there would be periods of insurrection instability within the Qianlong era, but these were, dealt with in a very kind of methodical, kind of concise way. To give you a couple examples, from 1786 to 1787, you have a rebellion in Taiwan, again, the island just off the shore of mainland China. This rebellion was quickly crushed. Um, from 1796 to 1804, you have what's called the White Lotus Rebellion. This was basically really kind of triggered by a millennial movement, kind of a religious movement that had turned into an anti-government protest. It was led by Zhang Zhangmo, and this really is in response to, in many respects, and takes advantage of the period of instability during and the time surrounding the end of the Qianlong emperor himself. So again, 1796 is the year in which the emperor dies, and there's going to be this kind of period of muddied waters and kind of the transition of power. Again, within autocratic states like China during this period of time, this means that there's going to be uh, those factors, such as this White Lotus rebellion, that's going to begin to try and take advantage of that uncertainty and that period of kind of, you know, um, having no clear line of succession. Uh, so um, it is also denotes a period of increasing amounts of government corruption during this period of time, the latter years of the 18th century and into the early 18th century. And so, as the Qianlong Emperor begins to relinquish more and more authority because of his declining mental state, in some cases, he was believed to have Alzheimer's. Uh, this meant that it was governing was falling to his delegates, who were not always the best prepared and the most competent when it came to governing authority and delegating power. Another example of China's imperial expansion during this period of time came in 1792 with the invasion of Nepal as well. So, China's in a period here of trying to assert its authority, but it's coming at the tail end, you might say, of the Qianlong era of dominance itself. Um, Pivoting once again to now uh, discussing the developments taking place in Southwest Asia, basically what we know to be the Middle East today. We'll turn attention towards the Safavid Empire. Here you have a resurgence of the Safavid Empire in the early 17th century from about 1603 to 1607. They were able to reconquer territory lost to the Ottomans, again, kind of the area of what is today um, Iraq and kind of that region. Um, there would be a new capital that would be established called Isfahan. This would become a major commercial center for the Safavid Empire itself. In 1604, the Mughal state or Mughal Empire would formalize relations with the Safavid Empire, and imperial envoys would take up residency within Isfahan itself. There would be the official exchanging of gifts. Assurances of friendship were made between the Mughal Empire and the Safavid Empire and the delegates thereof. And there would also be kind of pacification of the border within what is Afghanistan today between these two major imperial powers. Excuse me. By 1617, there would be a growing presence of European authority, again, namely with the arrival of the British East India Company. They would establish trading houses with the Safavid Empire and imperial authorities. In 1621, the Dutch East India Company would also establish trade relations. And it was the Dutch who quickly began to eclipse all other European powers with regard to their dealings with the Safavid Empire itself. In fact, they came to dominate European trade in what is today the areas in and around Iran. Roughly about the same period of time, by about 1630, the main commodity coming from and moving through the Safavid Empire was silk. And this was the most lucrative export of the Safavid Empire itself. And because the Safavid Empire was enjoying something of a renaissance of its own, we see in as early as the 1820s a significant cultural developments beginning to take place. Um, One of these occurred with the death of Sheikh Baha'i, who was one of the most powerful Shiite clerics in the Safavid Empire itself. Sheikh Baha'i um, studied and wrote on a number of topics and subjects: mathematics, medicine, logic, astronomy, poetry, jurisprudence, or law. What's interesting about this period of time, and especially with regard to Sheikh Baha'i and his death, is that sadly, you might say, future clerics no longer wrote about science and mathematics, that they didn't take up the banner that Baha'i had left as a legacy. And this is characteristic of a significant shift, or I should say rift, within the Islamic world with regard to this divide between science and faith. And this is a crossroads at which, in the case of the Safavid Empire, there's this kind of snubbing or turning away from scientific pursuits, largely by clerics and members of the clergy, the religious uh, quarter of the Islamic world, as they begin to turn more towards, uh, applying faith, applying scripture to understand and kind of promote a more religious kind of pursuit within daily life. And that, of course, would have pretty dramatic consequences, as we'll see, and it helps to us to understand kind of the aspects and developments leading to the kind of current state of affairs that we know today in that region. By 1629, there were advances in the medical sciences. We have written works um, that told of new instruments that were being used and developed in order to perform surgeries, rather advanced surgeries. Um, we have records of outlining various forms of the use of anesthesia in order to kind of make more the experience for the patient, him or herself, to kind of be more, kind of more enjoyable, if that's can be the term used. We also have, with regard to medicine in the medical field, people advocating for surgery for removing things like cancerous tumors, noting the improved recovery of the patients suffering from those maladies. By 1640, fortunes again begin to change for the worse. I mean, that there's this identity crisis, you might say, occurring with the Safavid Empire with regard to faith and reason. Um, but even in the midst of that, you do see kind of these glimmers of advancement as far as medicine was concerned, like I just explained, or with the accomplishments and the writings of Baha'i himself. But by 1640, politically speaking, the fortunes begin to change for the worse within the Safavid Empire. Beginning in 1639, you have the peace treaty with the Ottomans, in which the Safavids lost control over Baghdad and the Iraqi region once and for all. Under Abbas II, who reigned from 1642 to 1666, the army declined in size and quality, probably as a result of the loss of drawing troops from the Mesopotamian region. Under Shah Suleiman, or Safi II, who reigned from 1666 to 1694, food prices soared. We have records of there being famine and disease beginning to spread throughout the empire. So this is a period of, kind of turmoil within the Safavid state itself. Fast forward to the end of Suleiman's reign in 1694, you begin to see where Sufi and Sunni Islam were being eradicated as far as their free pursuit of faith within the Safavid Empire itself. Sufism was a sect of Islamic mysticism that placed a great deal of emphasis on having people having a more direct individual relationship with Allah. Um, the God in the Islamic faith itself. There would be the persecution of non-Muslim populations within the confines of the Safavid Empire itself. This would extend to persecution of Zoroastrians, Jews, and Christians as well. So there, by the close of Shah Suleiman's reign in 1694, we see religious intolerance running wild throughout the empire itself. It's the Shiite clergy that gained power and influence as a result, and became more independent of the ruling government itself in many respects as well. By 1722, an Afghan army begins to invade the Safavid Empire, kind of, again, realizing that there may be an opportunity to take advantage of the internal strife that's hitting the Safavid Empire itself. Um, in 1722 and 1723, you have Russian and Ottoman incursions. The Russians begin to seize lands around the Caspian Sea, or what is today the Caspian Sea. Ottomans begin to conquer parts of Western Iran. Both the Russians and the Ottomans, as a result of these successes, peacefully partition the Safavids' northwestern provinces, negotiating between themselves. So what you have here is the Safavid Empire losing territory at the hands of more aggressive neighbors, the Ottomans and the Russians. And then those lands, once they were in the hands of, or I should say, taken over and removed from Safavid authority, the Safavid weren't even welcomed at the negotiations to, determine the fate of those provinces that they once governed. When you lose sovereignty like that, it's going to be a humiliation first and foremost, but secondly, it's also going to lead to a loss of prestige. It's going to kind of lead to this death spiral in many cases, in which, the suspicion of weakness is going to embolden others once they get a taste of success and kind of consolidating control and beginning to chip away at your borders. Then this means that they're going to be compelled to even take bolder steps and measures. One individual who played this up to the fullest was a man by the name of Nadir Khan, who, as you can see in the slide, reigned from 1736 to 1747. In essence, Nadir Khan's arrival on the scene here marked the end of the Safavid Empire. Khan himself placed puppet figurehead rulers on the throne when he took over, when he sacked Isfahan. Um, these figureheads were taking orders from Nadir Khan himself, however, so Khan was really kind of the power behind the throne itself. Um, he also begins a very methodical march of conquest across the empire to subdue any, outlying kind of authorities that might contest his rule. And in 1747, Nadir Khan was assassinated. After a series of rulers and a period of kind of chaos, Aga Muhammad Khan would crown himself Shah in 1796 to establish the Qajar dynasty.